During the war that took place in the 1860s, a member of the Confederate Army named Jonah was forced to betray his commanding officer named Quentin Turnbull. At that time, Turnbull asked Jonah to burn down hospitals in the North American region. However, Jonah refused and fought back by killing Turnbull's son, Jeb, who had made a mistake, burned down the hospital. This also made Turnbull not accept it, so the commander arrested Jonah Hex and also killed his wife and son right in front of Jonah. Before leaving, Turnbull decided to let Jonah live, but left a scar on his cheek as a sign that Jonah must always remember the person who had destroyed her family. After several days of being tied up dying, Jonah was finally found by Crow people, where the tribe's shaman performed a ritual on Jonah. Jonah was eventually cured and had the ability to speak with the dead. Jonah then traveled to hunt down Turnbull. But who would have thought Turnbull, her former commander, was rumored to have died because he was trapped in a house that caught fire. From here, Jonah had nowhere to go and decided to become a bounty hunter. One day, Jonah was seen carrying the bodies of 3 of his quarry to a small town. He then gave the bodies to the man who had hired him, a marshal. Although Jonah did his job well, but the marshal did not want to pay Jonah. Instead, the marshal wanted to kill him, because whoever could kill Jonah would be rewarded with $500. But Jonah cannot be killed. Meanwhile, elsewhere, U.S. Army train is seen carrying weapons components that they have just purchased from other countries. Initially, the situation on the train is very calm, but soon the passengers are panicked when they see a group of men on horseback trying to attack the train. Not only that, they had also sent 2 spies into the ranks of the soldiers and threatened to explode the train with a bomb. The robbers then unleashed the passenger wagon, then blew it up with a dynamite bomb. After that, they took all the weapon components that they would use to fight the United States. As it turned out, the robbers were led by Turnbull, who was still alive. He deliberately faked his death so that Jonah would not hunt him down. The news of the robbery finally reached the president named Grant. A lieutenant named Grass then said that Turnbull was still alive and planned to use his robbery weapon to attack government military units on July 4, or the coincidence of the 100th Independence Day of the United States. Knowing this, the president ordered Lieutenant Grass to find a legendary hunter, none other than, that is, Jonah Hex, to take on the task of stopping Turnbull's actions. The story switches back to Jonah, who is in a bar. At the same time, there is a man who secretly wants to kill Jonah. However, of course, the man fails as he is immediately overthrown. Jonah continues his activities and meets Leela, a prostitute he's been seeing. Although Jonah's face was not like most people because of the scars, Lila was still willing to be with Jonah. Leela even invited Jonah to go out together. Just as they are about to leave, Lieutenant Grass and his troops barge in and tell Jonah that the president has asked him to join the military and return to serve his country. Jonah refuses at first, but after Lieutenant Grass tells him that Turnbull is still alive, Jonah finally agrees to join the military, and Jonah ready to hunt down the person who has ruined his life. Lieutenant Grass then took Jonah to the military base. The lieutenant told Jonah that his troops had captured one of the men who had robbed the military train. Unfortunately, before they could get more information, the person died during interrogation, so they couldn't get any more information. Fortunately, Jonah has the ability to talk to the dead. He then used this ability. By touching his body, the dead man could come back to life. A question and answer session ensued. The person admitted that he was not recruited by Turnbull, but by a former Confederate colonel who was also Jonah's former superior. The colonel was named Slocum. Jonah then removed his hand before the man, and the dead man was burned. Meanwhile, Turnbull met an official named Ableman Lusk, who secretly helped Turnbull's crimes. Even so, Lusk himself actually disliked Turnbull because he wanted to destroy the government. However, Lusk could not do anything and was forced to provide Turnbull with information and the location where the mass destruction weapon was located. After finding out the location, Turnbull and his men then go there and manage to retrieve several mass explosive trigger balls created by an inventor named Elise Whitney. Later that night, Jonah visits an illegal fighting venue where he meets Slocum, who is now a promoter. Jonah then asks Slocum to tell him where Turnbull was. However, Slocum said that Turnbull was dead. Slocum mocked Jonah by telling Jonah to ask Turnbull's dead son Jeb. Jonah then beat Slocum's men. After that, Jonah threw Slocum into the fighting ring, where there was already a gladiator with a beast creature's form. Of course, the fighter attacked Slocum and killed him. Before leaving, Jonah saved a dog who later became Jonah's adventure companion. Jonah decided to go to Gettysburg and dig up the grave of Jeb, Turnbull's son. Jeb came back to life. Before asking, Jonah apologized for killing Jeb during the war. Jonah did this because Jeb and Turnbull wanted to burn down a hospital. Jeb finally admits his mistake. Jeb also wanted to tell Jonah that Turnbull was hiding in Fort Resurrection. Jeb also did not forget to warn Jonah to avoid death, because many have been in the afterlife targeting Jonah. After finding out Turnbull's location, Jonah then went to the gun shop owned by Smith the gunsmith. There, Smith gives him a new weapon that can blow up 10 people at once. Long story short, in the evening, Jonah went to Turnbull's fortress and accidentally discovered that Turnbull was designing a weapon of mass destruction. Unfortunately, Jonah's whereabouts are soon discovered by Turnbull's men. They confront and force Jonah, so make Jonah to defeat them all. In the middle of the shootout, Jonah was finally shot by Turnbull's right hand named Burke. Burke himself was one of the people who helped Turnbull finish off Jonah's family at the time. Luckily, Jonah managed to escape from the shootout and still survive. In the morning, Turnbull ordered his troops to move all their weapons to a ship. Turnbull also ordered the kidnapping of the people closest to Jonah. Meanwhile, Jonah, who was severely wounded by the shots he received, was in agony as he tasted death and imagined what it would be like to fight Turnbull. On the other hand, Turnbull began to launch his action by blowing up a small town. He launched several cannonballs, then followed by a chemical ball that triggered a huge explosion, which killed many people. The president, who heard the news of the attack, began to panic. Plus, Jonah still has no news regarding developments regarding the whereabouts of Turnbull headquarters. Brooke then went to the embroidery house and deliberately kidnapped Layla to become a hostage. Meanwhile, Jonah, who was dying in the middle of the forest, was found again by the Cropeel, where the shaman performed the ritual for the second time to cure Jonah. After recovering, Jonah then immediately went to the harbor where Turnbull's warship was located, while sending a message to Lieutenant Grass where Turnbull was located and also asking for help. Later that night, Jonah secretly sneaked into the harbor, where Turnbull's warships were already preparing to attack the government center. There, Turnbull expressed his gratitude to Lusk for his help in carrying out Turnbull's plans. Even so, Lusk is shot and then dead. When Jonah reached the ship, Brooke suddenly attacked. The two of them then fought under the ship without anyone knowing. In the fight, Jonah managed to defeat Brooke and killed Brooke. However, Jonah was not satisfied, so he revived Brooke and burned him to be dust. At that very moment, Turnbull announced to his troops that today the Confederation would be free by destroying the government. Jonah then took this situation to shoot Turnbull secretly. However, Turnbull saw Jonah and immediately grabbed Layla. As a result, Jonah was captured. Then, the warship sailed to the center of the government, which was holding a celebration. Jonah and Layla were still tied up on the ship. At that moment, somehow, Layla managed to untie her bonds and free Jonah too, while saying that his real name was Tallulah. Not long after, Lieutenant Grass's reinforcements arrived to stop Turnbull. However, Turnbull immediately blasted them with a chemical ball. Jonah and Layla then attacked the Turnbull troops. When Jonah tried to stop the cannon shooter, he was suddenly attacked by Turnbull until he fell into the engine room. Meanwhile, Layla tried to fight off the gunner, but Layla was failed and lose. In another battle, Jonah seemed to lose to Turnbull, who had the upper hand. Turnbull immediately ordered his men to fire cannons at the government center. As the chemical ball was about to be fired, Jonah, using his axe, stopped the chemical ball. Then he brutally defeated Turnbull and wrenched his neck into the cannon. Jonah immediately rescued Layla and jumped just as the chemical ball fell and blew up the entire ship, killing Turnbull instantly. The next day, President Grant presents Jonah with money and offers him a job as a sheriff in the United States. Of course, Jonah refused the offer, but he assured the president that if they ever needed help, Jonah would be ready to help. Jonah then leaves with Layla. Then, Jonah goes to Jeb's grave to apologize again for killing his father. Jonah go again. Riding his horse and accompanied by his dog, Jonah became a legendary hunter. The movie ends.